Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1020 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. StickerU.com. Create custom stickers, labels, tattoos, and decals for your home and your business. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Canna Cabana. The lowest prices on cannabis guaranteed. Over 100 stores across the country. Learn more at cannacabana.com. And Ryobi. Join the cordless revolution with Ryobi's 18-volt ONE+ system. There are over 260 tools in the system, and it's available at Home Depot. Joining me this week, making his Toronto Mic debut, is 1050 CHUM's Scott Carpenter. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Woo, listen to those pipes. You, my friend, okay, we're going to get into the name, Scott, but
Okay.
You made the mistake of writing me an email because, am I right, you listened to the Mike Cooper episode of Toronto Mic'd?
Oh, yeah, I sure did. Yeah, Mike was a wonderful jock. He was, as I mentioned in the email, he was a superstar from the day he came in. He was very young.
Right.
And, Mike is one of my all-time favorite people. And, all of us at CHUM were family, but Mike is very special.
So you made the mistake of writing me to tell me you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then I pounced, right? Essentially, I smelled like blood in the water.
You did. Yes, you did. And I'll never forgive you for that, ever.
And now you're trapped. You simply,
I am trapped.
You're going to just stay here till I'm done with you. So Scott, you're okay if I call you Scott?
Sure.
Because I know you radio guys have to have, although not all of you, we'll get to that, but because I know Roger Ashby is a Roger Ashby from what I understand. But are you willing to share your real name?
No, my name is Patrick Bergen.
Okay. So Patrick Bergen is, so when I correspond with this Patrick fellow, I'm really talking to 1050 CHUM Scott Carpenter.
That's right. Yeah. The very one and only. Well, there are about 5 or 6 others, but, the only important one.
The only one I care about. Listen, I'm excited. We're going to, if anyone listening who remembers listening to 1050, and I was just on a Zoom with Fred Patterson from Humble and Fred, who grew up in Scarborough. And, he was talking about how, like, in the 70s, he said, there's only a handful of stations anybody listened to. The FM dial wasn't even a thing yet. So you're on the AM dial. And he said, yeah, sure, there's CFRB, if you want what's going on at 1010 there. But then there's 1050 CHUM, and then maybe CKEY, and he mentioned a country station. But, I mean, this is a time when, and then, of course, in the 70s, there's no alternative broadcasts. You're listening to the radio or nothing. So you had an enormous audience listening to you on 1050 CHUM.
Yeah, 1 million a week.
Wow. Imagine, what would they do today to get 1 million people to tune into their radio station?
I think they'd have to commit suicide on the air. I just don't think it would be possible. And it's not because of a lack of talent or anything like that. It's just the fact that you have so many alternative options in media, and including this.
Well, exactly. Somebody will choose to listen to this instead of tuning in whatever's going on the radio right now, CHFI or whatever. So a lot of ground to cover, but just because I'm fixated on names, my understanding is you don't actually start as a Scott Carpenter, right? What do you start as, a Dean Scott?
No, I started using my real name, Pat Bergen. And I was Dean Scott at CKLW because Pat Holliday worked at CKLW at that time, and they didn't want 2 Pats.
Right.
So I came up with this name, and I thought I'd pulled it out of the clear blue sky, Dean Scott. But as it turns out, there was a Dean Scott at CKY in Winnipeg, and obviously I had listened to him. See, I was stationed in Minot, North Dakota when I was in the Air Force, and I used to listen to CKY constantly. And I must have heard him on CKY, and that's where the name Dean Scott came from. And when I got to CHUM, J. Robert Wood mentioned, well, there's a Canadian guy, or actually he's an American, but there was a guy in Winnipeg named Dean Scott. And what name would you like to use instead? He didn't want me to use that. And I couldn't think of anything. And he said, how about Scott Carpenter? And I knew, of course, Scott Carpenter was an astronaut, but I didn't make any difference to me. I didn't care. So I said, sure, that's what it'll be.
See, today that would never be suggested because the thought would be SEO. Like, okay, we need a name that people can like Google and find you. And if people are Googling the name Scott Carpenter,
they'd find the astronaut.
Right.
Who actually became a friend of mine.
Really? How'd that happen?
No,
Just because
I'll tell you, this is we're taking a little detour here.
No,
this
I love detours,
story.
so detour away.
Okay. Well, I was working at the time in Baltimore. I was living in District Heights, Maryland. And it was a long distance call to call the radio station. You had to dial an area code, right? Well, one day I was trying to reach the studio and I forgot to dial the area code. And a lady answered the phone. And there wasn't any lady on the air at that time. So I thought, what the heck is this all about? And I said, who's this? And she said, who's this? And I said, Scott Carpenter. And she said, Dad?
Oh,
I got Scott Carpenter's daughter on the phone.
Oh my God.
By mistake.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then later, I used to have him on when I was, working in talk radio and all kinds of other formats. I'd have him on every year on the anniversary of the Aurora 7 flight, which was the flight that he took right after John Glenn, right?
Right.
And he would relate the story of how he got lost, basically, and they took like 3 hours to find him in the ocean.
Wow. I can't believe the odds that, that woman that you accidentally called was daughter of the more famous globally anyways, Scott Carpenter. That's amazing. You mentioned there's no woman on the air. Like, who is the first woman that you heard on the air?
Oh, you mean as a jock?
Sorry, as a jock. Yeah. I don't mean as like a
probably Liz Kiley. Liz and I worked together at WPGC, and then she went up to WABC. And I think that was the first time I actually heard a young lady on the air as a jock, because I wanted to hear what she sounded like on WABC.
Interesting. So coincidentally, we're recording, this is episode 1020, if you will. By the way, my brain is now thinking of ideas for episode 1050, but I'll talk to you more about these ideas later. But I have ideas like I have this,
sure.
What if why couldn't I I'll just name some random people. What if Roger Ashby, Mike Cooper, Jim Van Horn, you and Mike Holland, for example, all got together on Zoom and just talked?
Yeah, we'd do it. That would work. Look, CHUM is a family. And there's no other way of putting that. We get together, or we used to before the plague hit.
Right.
We used to get together every year for a reunion. And we get together all the time. Like a couple of years ago, Rick Murray, who was my operator, and Dave Wolf and myself, we got together down in Florida and went to some games down there. Wow. So we get together all the time. A couple of years ago, a bunch of us got together in Detroit, and Bob Wood, who was the program director at CHUM, and I drove in the Woodward Avenue parade, the greaser parade that they had.
Sure, greaser.
The Dream Cruise, and we drove in my mother's '86 El Camino up and down Woodward Avenue. So we get together all the time, and we're best of friends, and we have been for all these years.
So now I'm thinking definitely we do something for episode 1050, but tomorrow, tomorrow morning, I'm dropping episode 1021, which is 1021, and I had. Why did I bring this up again? It'll come. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now I remember why I brought it up. But I'm going to have a bunch of people who worked at CFNY in the history of CFNY. So David Marsden and a bunch of
Dave. Yep.
Yeah, and included it. So May Potts is there. And we were talking about Chick. So there was a Chick where right. Because the CFNY evolves out of Chick FM, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
And May Potts was talking about where the girls are and how novel this was, that there were like women on the air at this station, Chick
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And now that you mention it, I do vaguely remember that station, but I never listened to it, so I can't say I ever heard it. Yeah.
All right. By the way, where do we find you today? Are you in the GTA? Whereabouts are you?
Oh, no. I'm in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm in hillbilly country.
That's far away.
I don't
from
have
the
any
GTA.
teeth. I moved here and my teeth fell out.
Well, you can make those jokes. I feel like if I make those jokes, I can't do that.
That was absolutely, you'd be arrested in 5 seconds in Canada. Trust me.
Although we have our own, we have our own bumpkins. I learned during the truck.
I've seen them.
So there are, it depends where you are in the this wonderful province. Okay, so I want to get you to 1050 Chum, and then I want to dive deep, and you're gonna tell me all the stories you can recall. But maybe the good ones can't be told. But who knows? Maybe you save those for episode 10.
I'll tell them anyway.
Tell them anyway.
You can edit them out.
I love listening to your voice because, like, I'm gonna play soon. I'm gonna play some audio that you pointed me to a Facebook page you have with audio of you on 1050. And when I listen to Scott Carpenter on 1050 Chum, high energy, like it's just like woo, like my heart rate starts going, like I just want to run through a wall.
There's a story behind that.
Okay, well, how about this? Yes, don't forget to tell that story. But how the heck? How did you get the gig at 1050 Chum? And maybe even if you want to step back even earlier, like what made you get into radio? Because you sounded like that? You had to go to radio?
No. I was a musician. I started as a musician. I was a studio musician when I was 15 years old. And I did so many gigs, it got to the point where every time I turned around, let me just put it this way. My junior and senior years in high school, I played 6 nights a week in bars in Flint, Michigan. So,
Wow. Did you have to get a special note or something?
My mother went to the club and sat there until I was finished. I'm not kidding.
It's funny. Quick aside is that yesterday the Maple Leafs played the New Jersey Devils, and I'm watching. And the guy in net for the Devils, his name's Daw. Nico Daw, and he's the nephew of Rob Pruce. Now, Rob Pruce was the keyboardist for the Spoons and Honeymoon Suite later. But when Rob was on this program, he was talking about playing. He was a 15-year-old like keyboard like phenom, like a prodigy, and he needed a note or something. He needed some special paper.
That was probably a union thing. It was probably a union thing.
Because he was they said it was an age thing, like because the 15-year-olds couldn't get into the bar, but he had a special piece of paper so he could play like these clubs and bars with the Spoons.
Doesn't sound right with me, but it may be. I know in my case, she actually didn't have to be there. But I played a lot of gigs in Detroit when I was way underage, and the cops had come in there. They wouldn't even notice. So I wouldn't put too much credence in that at all.
No, just so people are clear, because we talked about how you were on the air in Windsor, and now we've got you in Michigan. So are you American or Canadian?
No, I'm an American citizen, but I'm pretty much half Canadian, if you want. I am, really. I mean, I think more Canadian probably than I do American.
So, okay, so this is just to get this distinction here. So keep going with this great origin story. So you're a musician, but how does that get you on the air?
Well, because I spent a lot of time, as we did in those days, you'd cut these records. They'd be local records. They wouldn't be national ones. They'd be regional. And then the DJs would want you to come in and talk to them and interview you and things like that. So I did that quite a bit. And I saw these guys. It was marvelous to me because they were entertaining thousands of people with nothing more than a couple of turntables and a microphone. And I was schlepping this drum set around. The thing weighed 900 tons. And I've got to drag this thing up to the stage, and I've got 200 people out there or less. And I thought, these guys are the ones that are really pulling this off. I mean, they're entertaining all these people. And they've got nothing except these turntables and this microphone and that transmitter out there. And I looked at that and I thought, that's the way to go. Plus, they were nuts, which was a big deal to me. I'm 6 bricks short of a load. I admit it. And these guys were nuts. And they would pull these publicity stunts and I would just listen to that. I'd be fixated on it. So at some point, I decided, I think I'm going to move away from the music thing and go into the radio thing. It looks like a better deal.
Let me ask you about your voice at the time. Like, did you sound like this?
No. I think that you know what? I don't really know, but I do have a suspicion that maybe all those years on the air, exercising my vocal cords in that way, I guess maybe that probably added to it.
Okay, because I asked Jeff Woods from formerly from Q107, but I asked him how do you get that voice, because he's got this amazing voice, and he says you got to start smoking and drinking very young.
No, I have never been a smoker. I smoke cigars, but you don't inhale those things. That's not going to make any difference.
Well, that's right, but he's got more of a little more.
Well, I'm sure he does, but I sure as hell don't.
Right. Well, okay. Later in this program, I'm going to ask you about Wolfman Jack. I thought you might be breaking into.
Wolfman, good friend of mine, Smitty.
Love it. And again, I grew up watching like the late great movies on City TV. This was like my bag, and I loved it whenever American Graffiti came on. Like I was in love with this movie. Yeah. All this is coming very, very soon. But okay, so what's the first station you work at?
First station was KCJB in Minot, North Dakota. I'm in the Air Force, and I find out that they're looking for somebody to work part-time. And I zipped right down there, and they hired me on the spot, and I was on the air the next day, and I didn't get off the air for probably 35, 40 years.
That's right. So at this time in the North Dakota there, you're Patrick Bergen, I guess, on the air.
I'm Airman Second Class Patrick Bergen.
Okay,
please.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 stripes. That's all I ever had.
Okay, I wish I knew what that I wish I knew more of what that meant, but it's more stripes than
it meant that I was pretty much useless.
Oh, okay, well, you're still 2 stripes more than I ever got. So
good for you.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay, so where do you go from? Where do you go next in your radio career?
Well, I worked at 2 stations in Minot on a part-time basis, and I was also playing in clubs every night, so I was a musician as well. But when I got out of the Air Force, I went to Grand Forks, North Dakota, worked at KNOX, and then I just kicked around to smaller radio stations, eventually wound up back in Michigan, and I was working for a horrible radio station in Midland, Michigan, and my career was going nowhere. My dad wanted me in the worst way to get out of radio and go to work in Flint at General Motors at the AC, where he spent 30 years,
Sure.
And I had, at his behest, I went down there and applied. And the lady told me, well, we don't have any openings right now, but you're a veteran and we prioritize veterans and we'd love to hire you. So I'm back in Midland, Michigan. I'm working part-time managing a donut stand, and I'm doing the morning show on this little piece of junk radio station. And my career is, like I said, going nowhere. Get a call from the AC, and they say, come on down, we have an opening for you. And I said, I'll be right there. So I get dressed, I'm ready to go. And as I'm walking out the door, literally, the phone rings again. And it's Dave Kushler from WKNX in Saginaw. And I had left a tape with them like 6 months prior, and I didn't think anything was ever going to come of this. And Dave said, we have an afternoon drive opening. Would you like to come to work for us? And KNX had a 60 share in that area of Bay City, Midland, Flint, not Flint, but Saginaw, and all up through the thumb of Michigan. And that was the start of my career. I missed out on being an AC slug by that much.
And for the non-radio people listening, 60 share, does that mean 60% of
yes.
radio listeners are tuned in?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes, 60% of the radios that are on at that time are listening to that station.
And this is an era, of course, when there was lots of radio listeners, so you got to get even more perspective there. Okay, so what brings you to Ontario, Canada?
Okay, I worked at WKNX. I worked down at WTTO in Toledo, and then eventually I made my way to CKLW in Detroit. Now, CKLW was another monster. That station, I received a hitline call from the Arctic Circle.
Oh, wow.
Guy on a ship went through Mars, which was the what is it? No, it's a network of radio, private radio.
Shortwave or no?
Not shortwave. What do you call it? It's
pirate radio. Okay, but it's somehow he got you.
Yeah, it's just a short wave, or not a short wave. Here I am going in circles.
Right.
It's you'd own your own little transmitter and that kind of thing. Amateur radio.
Okay.
Amateur
ham radio.
Ham radio. There you go.
There you
That's
go. Eventually
what it is. It's a network of ham radio operators, and they transmit these signals, through their various little radio stations. And this guy called me through the Mars system and requested a song from the Arctic Circle on a ship up there.
That's unbelievable. That's quite the signal right there. Amazing. So, so that's where you're Dean Scott when you're at CKLW.
CKLW, and I was only there for about a month and a half. And J. Robert Wood was driving through Detroit on his way back to Toronto, and he heard me on the air. And at that point, Don Regan, who was also at CKLW at that time, had already been hired by CHUM. So Bob asked him to bring a tape up with him. And I remember while I was on the air, the operator was saying, now do a really good job tonight. Do a really good job tonight. He knew what was going on. I had no clue.
Wow.
And so he made the tape. Don Regan took it up to Bob Wood, and Bob Wood hired me. And Bob told me, as a matter of fact, when we did the Dream Cruise, he was in the car with me, and he said, when I heard you on the air, my hand was shaking. And I thought, he's got to be kidding. I didn't think I was anything special, but he obviously did, and that's how it happened.
Well, he knows talent, and he heard something in the timbre of your voice, and he felt you'd fit on 1050 CHUM.
Well, he sure did, and that is Bob Wood. I can tell you.
Yeah, talk to me about Bob Wood, because, please tell me everything you can about your program director at 1050 CHUM, Bob Wood.
Well, he's a great guy. Number one, okay, there's no better guy in the universe than Bob Wood. But the thing about Bob was he could hear somebody on the air, and he could tell that guy will fit in, right? It wasn't, I didn't do any bits. I didn't do anything special at CKLW. He just heard something that he thought would fit in. That is the essence of CHUM in the 1970s. Here's the thing. None of us were we weren't fantastic in any way, shape, or form. We were okay, I thought. I didn't think I was anything special, and the other guys didn't think they were particularly special, because we've had these conversations, and they said the same thing. But the secret was that Bob Wood made the whole greater than the sum of the parts. Every guy on that radio station fit in perfectly with the other guys. We were best friends, we were co-workers, and we still are best friends.
That's why episode 1050 is going to be a monster. I'm already excited. Okay, so Bob Wood gave you the name Scott Carpenter. Is there, did you ever learn what the origin was, or did it just sound good? Is there any reason?
It sounded good.
Sounded good. Scott, okay. All right. That's good enough for me. Now, I want to play some of you on 1050 CHUM before we dive deeper. And I have some great questions. A lot of your fans heard you were coming on, and I got some fantastic questions for you. But let me play this. Now, this is how the sausage gets made. I'm going to paste that Facebook link into my browser.
Oh, boy, that's going to work great.
Here we go. You ready?
Probably be a commercial.
No.
At CHUM. Right on. Pick up the next CHUM Sock Hop tomorrow night at Etobicoke Collegiate, hosted by Mark Cooper, the Tripper.
Music Radio 1050 CHUM.
She's a straight shooting woman. Gotta watch her when she gets loaded. It ain't the straight shooting woman, it's her straight shooting father I worried about. 11:13 at CHUM #1 with Scott Carpenter.
There's a feeling around, it's a song, it's a sound, empty fever.
My woman, you see, is at Women's College Hospital tonight, because she had to have a little old operation, and she called me up a little while back. She said, look, I want you to play this song because I really dig the song, and all the girls up here want to hear it too. So this is it. Olivia Newton-John from CHUM, and I love you, I honestly love you.
Baby, I hang around.
Do you want to hear more? I could keep going a little longer. Do you want to hear more?
No, it's all right. I mean, that pretty much sums up what I did.
Okay, so I talked about the energy. Where did that style come from? It's a high energy style you employ there.
Well, I never started out that way. I'll tell you that because the guy that I wanted to pattern myself after was a jock named Joel Sebastian on WXYZ, and he was cool. He was a cool guy, right? I wanted to be cool like this guy.
Like when you say cool, do you mean like David Marsden on 104.5?
David Marsden.
Like that. I'm not talking Dave Mickey, who was completely bananas.
Completely different. He was like that.
It's like I think David goes to like Montreal and he comes back to CHUM FM and he's totally like this cool mellow cat. Like, is that what you're talking about? I'm just trying to find a
no. That I'm sorry to say it, but and in David's case, it's not true. I mean, it sounds like an affectation. Right. That is actually Dave. I know Dave very well, and he is a cool guy. But in the case of Joel Sebastian, he just sounded like what you would call a cool cat. Okay. You know what I mean? Back in the 50s, there were these hip guys, guys.
Like hep cats, like sort of like Ned Flanders and his parents in the episode of The Simpsons. Like they'd be at like,
there you go.
You know,
yeah,
hey,
that kind of guy,
groovy,
man. We're going down the street, man. We just chugling. We chugling now. That's right. Hey, here we go. That's what Joel sounded like, right? Okay. He just sounded cool, and I wanted to sound cool. Well, Bob Wood didn't want me to sound cool. And one day I was ill. I had a sore throat, and I think I had the flu. And I was kind of down on the air. And Bob called me up. He said, "Oh, can you pick up the energy a little bit? You know, it's starting to drag a little bit." And I thought, "Oh man, I feel like crapola, and this guy wants me to pick up the energy." So I thought, I'll fix him. And I went on the air and I started that whole yelling and howling and jumping up and down and pulling out my hair kind of thing.
Right.
Bat phone rings again, and I'm thinking, Okay, he's going to tell me no, I don't want to do this after all. Calls me up, "Scotty, that's just what I want."
Hey.
So there
so you're stuck now. You got to put that. So is it difficult? Like, do you? I don't know. Like, how do you have to snort a line of Coke or something to get up there?
No. Please don't say that. People.
Well, I'm asking the tough questions here.
Oh yeah, you sure are. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's just I remembered a guy once. He was on WXYZ too. His name was Lee Allen.
Okay.
And he was a very high energy jock. So I thought, well, okay, if they want that, then I had to have I had nobody in my life that sounded like that other than listening to Lee Allen on the radio. So I based it on him.
Okay. Now, where does the nickname, now we talked about how you're a Patrick and you're on the air. Everybody knows you as Scott Carpenter in this market. Where does the nickname the Boogeyman come from?
Okay. Back in the 70s, boogie was a term that was just used constantly. Sure. I mean, you're going to boogie down the street. What does that mean? I mean, good luck with that. We're going to boogie tonight, whatever. That was the word. So I used it all the time, shamelessly on the air, right? Sure. And one day my operator, Bob Humanick, came on a squawk back and he said, "You're the boogeyman." And I thought, ooh, yeah, baby. So that was the boogeyman right there.
Love it. It's like that's like a nickname on a nickname when you think about it, which is what I always joke with Jay Michaels. Now he's in Montreal actually because he left town. But Jay Michaels is a fake name, Jay Michaels. But he put a fake name on the fake name because he went by Mad Dog, and I just think it's like how many layers of phony shtick can you pile on? But there you go, the Boogeyman. That's stuck. Okay, so I'm gonna dive into some of the questions, and I like this one from Rock Golf because it's going to introduce us to Canadian graffiti, which I want to talk to you about. But I'll read it. He's got a bunch of points here, but I'll start it. Rock Golf says, "Loved this guy." There you go. He loved you. Okay.
Thank you, Rock Golf.
"I remember him hosting Canadian graffiti on Sunday nights."
Yep. Another 60s year, by the way.
"Counting down the top songs of the late 50s and early 60s. He played Ray Charles's Hit the Road Jack and said, 'That's so good, I want to hear it again.' And then he played it again."
Yeah.
So the first question from Rock Golf is, was that planned or was that spontaneous? Because this guy never forgot that you played that song twice in a row.
It was completely spontaneous. I never planned anything. I would write out some material, some lines and stuff from the newspapers and stuff like that. But I never scripted anything else. Everything else just came off the top of my dumb head.
Good for you. Now, it's funny, we mentioned Canadian graffiti. So, you mentioned earlier Greaser and this. So I'm a bit younger than you, so I don't remember American graffiti in real time, but I do remember loving, and I also loved Happy Days. So that was like one of my first favorite shows was Happy Days, which kind of comes out of American Graffiti, if you will. But
yes.
I mean, is it Ron Howard?
Yeah, Ron Howard was
in American Graffiti. So I would love one of my favorite movies to show up on Late Great Movies when Mark Daly would tell me it was American Graffiti. I absolutely loved the whole vibe of American Graffiti, like the strip and the 50s and that whole greaser vibe or whatever. So how much did that influence what the Boogeyman became?
Well, the essence of American Graffiti is the way I grew up. You saw them cruising.
Right.
We didn't use the term cruising. We used the term bombing or dragging, but we would bomb Maine. We would bomb Woodward. We would go all up and down Woodward Avenue. That was absolutely bang on. Wow. So what American Graffiti did, it not only brought back memories, but it became a fashion, and the Canadian Graffiti Show grew out of that. I was doing 1950s style dances at schools in Toronto. I had a great big huge PA system, roadies, the whole works. Right. We would go and we would recreate the 1950s style and so forth with these dances. These kids would all dress up like, the actors in Canadian or in American Graffiti. Sure. And I was drawing huge crowds. I mean, these kids would be right around the block trying to get in. So Bob Wood and I were talking about that. I was in his office, and we got to come up with some way to leverage this on the air. And sitting in the corner of his office were these record albums. They were called Cruisin', and they were reproductions of radio shows from the 1950s. And they had the original jocks, Dick Biondi, Russ Weirdbeard Knight, and all these other guys, right? Right. And they would put them in between the songs on the record. And I thought, we could do this on the air. And so Bob Wood and I came up with this idea of Canadian Graffiti, and that's where it started. And it was a 60 share show on Sunday night. 60% of the radios in Toronto were tuned to Canadian Graffiti. It was incredible. That
is absolutely incredible. Now, before we say goodbye to Rock Golf, though, he has a memory, and I always have this situation where I have a memory of something, but it's like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, and I don't know if it actually happened or if it's like something that just got implanted in my head through the years, and I think I remember it. So I'm kind of excited to find out for Rock Golf the answer to this question. Rock Golf has a memory.
I think I know the question.
Okay, but he says he has a memory of you dropping the word MFer, but not MFer, but maybe mother effer. Yeah, so this is his memory. You drop MFer in the middle of one of your traditional hyperbolic rants. He wants to know, is it possible he heard this, or is this a faulty memory?
Oh, faulty. I never ever said anything.
So, Rock Golf, I don't know how many years you've had that bouncing around your cranium, but now we got the real talk from Scott Carpenter himself. No, I couldn't imagine that would happen.
I would not have said.
No, didn't happen. And he asks about, I'm actually at the end of this, he asks about somebody specific you worked with at 1050 CHUM in the 70s. But after we thank some sponsors, I'm going to actually run down the roster and talk to you about everybody, because I know we talked about Mike Cooper off the top, but I want to ask about these cats you worked with at 1050 CHUM myself. But I want to get to Paul Hawkyard. Paul Hawkyard. It's a cool name. Paul Hawkyard says, "Hey, Mike, for me, Carpenter..." Okay, I see. Ask him how heavy was the payola back in the 70s, and in what form he wants. So was there any payola going on in the 70s that you can speak about?
Not that I ever got. I don't know anything about that. And certainly at CHUM, there would never have been such a thing. We had a very specific protocol that was followed about adding records and so forth and promoting them. And it was all on the basis of sales and what we thought would fit into the format. But not once, not ever did anybody accept any money. Now, there was payola back in Michigan prior to me getting in the business. And I know for a fact that some guys got paid in various ways, shapes, and forms, not always with cash, some other things sometimes, but that never happened at any point in my career, ever.
Okay, he's got another question about a movie. So we talked about American Graffiti, and there's another movie. I'm going to actually play the trailer just to set this up. But before that, I have a question. So I was reading about, Scott Carpenter on CHUM, and you were a legend, my friend. And I was reading all about Canadian graffiti, and then I learned about the graffiti parade. And I want to ask you about the Big Honk event. Please tell me all the details about this Big Honk event.
Okay, well, once again, I go back to those cruising albums, and my memories of radio back in the late 50s and early 60s. And these guys on the air were 6 bricks short of a load. They were funny. They always involved their listeners with whatever bits they were doing. People would call up, they'd put them on the air, just like Wolfman did in American Graffiti, right?
Right.
So, when I was doing the graffiti show, every week I would come up with something like that the audience could participate in. One day I was stuck for an idea. I was coming in on the subway, and I thought, what am I going to do? I don't know, what my bit's going to be this week. And I remembered a radio station in Grand Rapids, Michigan, that had a neon sign in the studio window which faced the street. And cars would come by, and the jock would hit the button and light it up. It said honk. Right?
Right.
So I thought, that's it. We're going to honk horns. So I get on the air, I believe it was 9 o'clock. And I started counting it down. I said, it is 9:02, and wherever you are at 9:02, if you're in your car, honk your horn in solidarity with all the greasers in Toronto. And if you can come by the station, please do that. Come and honk your horn outside the radio station. Right. And I counted it down after every song. I said, we're now an hour and 47 minutes from the Big Honk. We're now an hour and 42 minutes from the Big Honk. And we, as you may know, at 1331 Yonge Street, the newsroom faced the street, and they had windows all along that wall, right? But they always had the blinds closed. And I was in the studio, which was basically in the middle of the station. I had no clue what was going on outside. And I thought I'd take a look and see if anybody actually showed up, right?
Right.
So I went out there. We opened up the blinds. I figured maybe 10 people. There were cars on both sides of Yonge Street. I'm told from the lake shore to Eglinton.
Oh my God.
On both sides of the street with the lights flashing. And I thought, I am a dead. Well, you said the word earlier, MF,
Right.
I'm done, right? I'm fried. And I was going to call it off, but I thought, you know what? They're just going to honk the damn horn anyway. So I got on the air and I said, it is time. Let her snort. Right. And it went up like an air raid.
Oh my God.
I mean, it sounded like the Blitzkrieg in London with those horns blowing. Right. Wow. And it blew out the police switchboard. They could not get a legitimate call in because everybody was complaining about this stupid thing that I did.
Right.
And a cop came down to the radio station. He was going to haul me in.
Wow.
And he said to me, you're not going to do this again, are you? And I said, yeah, I was thinking about doing it again next week. And he said, no, that wasn't a question.
So you got a warning.
Following week, I caught hell too. I got a note from Dave Charles, or he called me, that night. He said, that's the greatest thing I ever heard. It's the funniest bit I ever heard. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. And then I get a call the next morning from Bob Wood. And when Bob would call me and say, Scotty, I knew I was in deep crap right there. He would use that approach. Scotty, we would like you to come down to the radio station and talk to us about that thing you did last night. So
yeah,
I went down to CHUM, and I went to my little mailbox and opened it up, and there was a note from Dave Charles, the same guy that had called me the night before. Opened it up, read it, said, that was the most irresponsible, ridiculous. What did you do? I thought, you son of a. So anyway, I go upstairs and all of the management is waiting for me.
Yeah.
Fred Surratt, Mr. Waters, Bob Wood, the Pope, everybody. And they read me the riot act, right?
Right.
Don't ever do that again. Don't ever do that again. I thought, okay, I won't do that again. So the next weekend I got on the air and I said, I just caught holy hell last week. Please, whatever happens tonight at 11 o'clock, don't blow your horn. And I counted it down exactly the same. And sure enough, This time, not only were they parked on both sides of Young Street, we had clowns painting faces. We had guys juggling in the middle of Young Street, and it went up like an air raid again. We did it twice. Shut the freaking the city down.
Do you remember what year this was?
73, maybe something like that. I can't remember. Okay, for sure.
That's
whenever American Graffiti was out, it was around that time.
Right now, because okay, so you get the warning, I guess, from the cops. You never did get arrested because when Mike Cooper was sitting here, we talked about the April Fool. I feel like that was 75, the April Fool's Day prank. Yep. But so it sounds like you 1050 guys. The cops were friend. It was not uncommon for the cops to be involved. I suppose you had a lot of power.
They would show up on occasion. Yeah. We would just order some food from next door, and we'd just, hey, the buffet's right there, guys.
Right. Wow. Okay. The great big honk event. What a time for this city. I mean, we're all uptight over the noise of the honking, I guess, outside of 1331 beyond. But from Lakeshore to Eglinton, that's amazing. Like, just, I can't even, I would love to see like an aerial photo of this. That would be incredible. That's quite something.
Yeah, now, me too.
Please, I also saw when I was doing my homework that you hosted a weekly teen advice program called Guidance. What was Guidance?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was just a talk show. I'd had some talk radio experience back in Toledo, and I did this kind of show, for teenagers. And so we had Johnny Gilbert, who was there for the housewives. So I did one for the teenagers, and it was on a Saturday, I believe it was. And they would just call with, teenage kinds of questions and problems, and I'd offer this sage advice from this clown that had no clue what he was talking about.
Okay, cool. Now, I mentioned another movie. So we talked about American Graffiti, but I'm going to play, and bear with me, it's a minute and a half here, maybe even longer, but I want to set the stage here. So let's listen to this trailer.
Okay.
And you can hear
Now, Face Off.
as they sing sweet songs
A touching story
Trudy.
of love.
in your ear.
With softness, beauty,
Have no fear,
passion,
'cause it's
and one barrier.
yes, we'll be free. Oh, I know we'll be free.
You know something, Billy? You never needed anybody in your life.
Look at me.
Cut it out, please.
Don't mind me, Billy.
Sherry, I love you. And I need you. I need you. I really, really need you.
Go get him, Peepoo. Go get him.
For God's sake, Billy, stop him! Why'd you do it? Why? You're just like the rest of them.
No, I'm not. Because I'm younger and stronger and tougher. And that's why you dig me.
I can't go. Go ahead, Billy. Have another drink to the establishment. To the system, you know?
You're out of your skull.
Yeah, maybe, but it's my skull, okay?
All right, Billy. Let's get something started.
Face Off. All about fighting your way to the top and finding no one there.
We'll be free.
Wow. Okay, Face Off. Now,
I remember that pretty well.
well, let me read the question from Paul Hawkyard again here. Let me dig it up here.
Yeah.
Where's your question, Paul? But it is, hey, Mike. Okay, here it is. Any good stories from hanging around the filming of Face Off, which is, in Paul's opinion, is the greatest hockey movie ever made?
It was actually a very good movie, to be honest with you. I can't remember the guy's name that was the male lead on it. You remember?
Yeah, Hinton? Oh, no.
Al Hintel.
Right.
Was his
Art
last name,
Hintel.
wasn't it?
Art Hintel.
Art Hintel.
Hindle.
He
with
was
a
an
D.
actual
Hindle with
hockey
a D.
player.
Yeah, Art Hindle. Yes. Art Hindle.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. And he was good. So he did a lot of his own scenes. One of the scenes involved him, I believe that I'm remembering this correctly. Jacques Plante, they brought in to play the net, right? And director said, "Okay, Jacques, you got to let him, you got to let the shot through." Yeah. So Art whacks and Jacques goes whap, and he could not let the thing through. He was incapable of letting it through. That was a funny thing. And then the other one, this is just me, because I didn't know much about hockey players at all. And Derek Sanderson came out on the ice, and I never saw a scarier human being in my life. He first of all, he looked like he'd been out partying all night long. His eyes were bleeding, but he came out on the ice, and that was the scariest looking guy I ever saw in my life. And I thought to myself, man, I'm glad I'm on this side of this thing and not out there on the ice with these guys.
Now you mentioned Derek there, but I've had Jim McKenney on this program, and Jim McKenney, of course, is also in a lot of those scenes. And there's a lot of Leafs, or I guess Ron Ellis is in this thing, Jim Dory, Paul Henderson, George Armstrong plays
Paul
himself.
was in it.
Yeah. Paul, right. Paul Henderson. So, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with this face-off, because now there's a more famous face-off with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, but this face-off is from 1971 and is a very local. And that great voice you hear, which I always hear that voice, I think, oh, that sounds like Leslie Nielsen, but it's John Vernon, of course, which people might know better from Animal House. John Vernon, but a great actor too. But anyway, that's kind of a fun piece of Toronto history from the 19. And you mentioned Trudy, right? That was Trudy Young. That was
Trudy Young.
Yeah. Leads.
She's a sweetheart. I knew her vaguely. I didn't know her real well, but she's a really, really nice lady.
Awesome. Okay, my friend, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to thank some sponsors. Now, I know you're in Virginia here. Wait, which Virginia are you in? You in Virginia or West Virginia?
No, I'm in Virginia.
Virginia.
Them other ones up there in West Virginia, up there, that's a different one.
Virginia is for lovers. They still saying that down there? I think that was.
Yeah, and we are. We're very much for lovers. Yeah.
Well, if when I do eventually get to meet you, Scott, and when I meet you, I'll try to remember you're a Pat, not a Scott, but I might call you Scott because heck, that's how you're known here. But I'm going to
give you either one. I'm like Pavlov's dog. I drool either way.
Maybe I'll call you the Boogeyman. I'm going to call you Boogeyman. But I'm going to give you gifts. I'm going to have some lasagna for you from Palma Pasta. Thank you, Palma Pasta, for providing guests with lasagna. Fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery. Delicious. People can get that in LCBOs or at the retail store near Royal York and Queensway. We have Toronto Mike stickers for you that were made by stickeru.com. You can get that in Virginia. Go to stickeru.com to get your quality stickers and such. I want to thank Ridley Funeral Home. They sent over flashlights and measuring tape and some fun stuff for you. Canna Cabana. I don't know what the deal is in Virginia, but here in Canada, cannabis is legal, and we have this great retail store across the country called Canna Cabana. They won't be undersold on cannabis or cannabis accessories. What's the deal with cannabis in Virginia? Is it a no-go down there?
It's illegal.
It's illegal. Okay.
Yeah, it is in Virginia. In the district, it's legal, and I think they're probably going to legalize it in Maryland. This is a tri-state area, Well, one's not a state, one's a district. But anyway, I don't think we'll probably see legal marijuana in Virginia, but nobody cares. They smoke it anyway.
That's right. Just you find a guy. But here you don't have to worry about the guy under the bridge. You can go to Canna Cabana. And Ryobi, I want to thank Ryobi. This is the first month Ryobi's been a partner of the program. And I want to remind those who have any work to do on the home or in the backyard, the Ryobi 18-volt 1+ high-capacity lithium plus battery provides 4 times more runtime, 4 times longer lasting charge, and it's 20% lighter than the old NiCad batteries. It's an awesome system. There's 260 tools in the system. All the Ryobi 18-volt 1+ tools and chargers work with the same battery and the same chargers. So you can buy 2 batteries and 260 tools. You're good to go. My wife absolutely loves this system, and we talked about that last Friday with Becky from Ryobi. Okay, Scott Carpenter. I looked up the lineup from 1050 CHUM, and I just randomly chose a year. Let me go to my notes here. I decided to go with 1975 because I needed to start somewhere.
Okay.
So I'm going to say the name and you're going to share memories. Some of these people are no longer with us. Some of them are. Later we'll talk about what roster you can, what Avengers like CHUM roster you can assemble for the Zoom I want to record for episode 1050. But let's start with Jay Nelson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What can you tell us?
Jay Nelson was, without in question in my mind, one of the top 2 or 3 inventive people that I ever met in my life. Jay, he could make anything funny. And sometimes the things he made funny were things that probably shouldn't have been made funny. But that was just Jay. I mean, he just had this way about him that he would entertain you no matter where you were and no matter what you were doing. You could be at a funeral and he'd be cracking jokes. And he wouldn't mean anything by it other than he wanted you to feel at home with him. He wanted you to be, comfortable with him. And Jay was the star of the radio station, but of course you would never know that because, he would go with us to Seniors. Remember Seniors on Young Street? It was a restaurant. We'd always go there after our confessions meetings with Bob Wood. Right. And we would, talk things over and do what wackos do when they get a chance to get together. And he was a hell of a guy at the Red Rooster too. That was the bar we all went to next door to the radio station. So Jay was a good friend and a fantastic air personality. I loved him dearly.
Now let's talk so I would say that would be if I took a random day in 1975. Jay's on from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. He's your morning show. Yeah. 9
and
to
then,
11.
Then Gibby.
Yeah, John Gilbert.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. John was the perfect host for that show. Previously, Larry Solway had done it. And Larry, I thought, was somewhat cynical and somewhat insulting to his listeners. He called them bingo players. Right. And he had a boat he called Bingo Player. And I thought, that I just didn't think that was appropriate. But Johnny Gilbert related to his listeners. Mostly housewives, right? And most of them stay at home, and some of them, living on the poverty line, really. But he had lived on the poverty line. John had come from very, very humble beginnings. I don't think he got past the 8th grade in school, maybe 9th grade. I'm not sure. I may be wrong about that. But he was able to take that experience and build empathy with his listeners. It was one-on-one with Johnny Gilbert, no question about it, and that was the power of it. And he was absolutely the best for that particular show. It was unlike anything else. We were the only rock radio station in America, in the world, really, right. From my perspective, to have a talk show on the air for 2 hours every day. So was there any music? Not on his show, no. Wild. Okay, so that's 9 to 11. That is wild. Okay, so do you now? Since I think this is all in your brain because you knew John Gilbert was coming up after Jay Nelson. Who's up after John Gilbert? Probably Rhodey. Yep. John Rhodey. Yep. So talk to me about John. John was and is to this day one of the most intelligent people we've ever known in radio. He had a degree in computer science. He came to us. Well, he was there before I was, so I can't say he came to us, but he came to CHUM, I believe, from WRKO in Boston, which was a major Drake station at that time. John was phenomenally dry with his humor and very intelligent with his humor. And he was one of these guys that could relate to almost anybody, but he would do so in such a manner that brought you up, and more closely aligned with his IQ level, which was probably in the universe, wow. In outer space, probably 200 or something. I'm not sure. Sure. Can you score him for the episode 1050 extravaganza? No. I don't think John actually does anything at all. He doesn't come to the reunions. I haven't seen him since I left Toronto. I only talked to him once, I believe, since I left Toronto. Okay. I doubt he owns a winery. He has a winery now, and that's his whole life, as I understand it. All right, I can't wait to talk about this next guy.
which is one of my favorite radio personalities to talk about. But talk to me about Shotgun Tom Rivers.
Mr. Reavers. There was nobody like Tom Rivers. Nobody ever liked Tom Rivers. He was my best. Well, he and Terry Steele were my two best friends. And Rivers, I mean, I would leave my front door unlocked because sure as hell, Rivers would be on my couch, crashed out the next morning, and I have no idea where he'd been, and he had no idea where he'd been. You know, he was another one of these guys. His brain just went 150 miles an hour. He could come up with a bit so fast it'd make your head swim, and he would always be funny. He would always be bang on with his approach on the air. That meant his timing was absolutely impeccable, and he was one hell of a nice guy. I miss Tom Rivers terribly.
I'm of an age where I grew up listening to Tom on CFTR.
Sure.
So loved my Tom Rivers, absolutely. Now, you mentioned his name, but Rock Golf also, I should just point out, wanted me to ask you about your favorite Terry Steele memory. So maybe talk about Terry Steele and then share a memory or two of Terry Steele.
Well, Terry and I went all the way back, and from the day he arrived at CHUM, we were close friends. He did 6 to 9, I did 9 to midnight. One guy called us the greatest 1-2 punch in radio history. And Terry was one of these guys that could do anything on the air. He could be absolutely dead serious and sober, you know, in one bit. The next bit, he'd be off the wall, you know. And he was a very, very good friend of mine. Terry and I spent many a night down at the Red Rooster, toasting one another.
I'll bet.
And up at his cottage at 6 Mile Lake, I'd go up there, and he came down with me. I had a little boat on Lake Scugog, and we went out. We'd go out on that. So he and I were very close friends, and I miss Terry terribly. As a matter of fact, I learned that Terry passed away in, I guess it was 92. I was working in Tucson, Arizona at the time. Warren Cosford told me. And it was right then and there, I thought to myself, I have got to get out of this business before it kills me.
Well, you're still here, man.
I'm not in the business anymore. I was an IT guy for 12 years.
Okay, well, then I promise once we run down this lineup and I ask you about a few more names, we'll find out what happened post-CHUM with you, because we got to bring it up to speed here. But okay, so you're on 9 to midnight. Talk to me about Scott Carpenter. Just kidding. I'm going to just ask you about some names now. Chuck Morgan.
Chuck Morgan, he came to, I can't remember where he came to us. He became a consultant, a radio consultant, and he did very, very well. He programmed a lot of major radio stations in the United States after he left CHUM. He wasn't with us very long, but
right.
Yeah, he was good. He was a good jock.
Okay, so he was like overnights. And then here's finally, so I mean, other than Mike Cooper, who we talked about off the top, we haven't talked about any FOTMs yet. By the way, Scott, you're now an FOTM. That's a friend of Toronto Mike. So you'll keep that designation for the rest of your life, my friend.
Oh, God, no.
But here's another FOTM who's been over a couple of times. Talk to me about Jim Van Horn.
Okay. Jim is, once again, another one of these guys. All of them, in my opinion, are pretty much equal. They all brought something special to the radio station and to their time slot on the air. And they were all, as I said earlier, part of that group that made the whole greater than the sum of the parts. And Jim fit in absolutely perfectly. He was an absolutely marvelous on-air personality. His timing was impeccable. He always had intelligent and eloquent things to say, and I can't say enough about him. He's a good guy, and we've kept in touch. He had some an illness here not too long ago, and I'm happy to say he's better now, and I like him a lot. I always did. Always liked Jim.
Yeah, I like the fact he's got the rock jock persona from 1050, and then he's also got the whole TSN sports media where he had a great career there as well. So we all love Jim Van Horn here. Now, this name you mentioned, you're American, and Tom Rivers. I mean, a lot of these cats are American. This is something that Cooper mentioned when he was over here a couple of weeks ago. But a lot of these big voices, especially in the 70s, these CHUM 1050 CHUM voices are American. what was that about? Was that just simple? I mean, excluding Roger Ashby, where I'm hoping you'll talk about him in a minute. But and I mean, Jim Van Horn's Canadian as well, right?
Yeah,
yeah. But a lot of these guys are American. What's up with that?
It was we came from the Drake format, CKLW, and Bob Wood wanted to
right
streamline the CHUM, right? And so he brought in guys that worked in those formats. I had worked with Mike Joseph, who was the ultimate format guy, and then later at CKLW. And it just so happened we all had experience with guys, programmers like Paul Drew and people like that. Duke Roberts was another one, Most of us were Americans, but most of us acclimated ourselves to Canada very, very quickly.
Well, let me ask you about another American, John Major.
Mm-hmm. Yep. John Major, another good friend of mine. Sandy and I went down to South Carolina where he was working, and we spent an evening with him. Just as had a wonderful time. Went out to dinner and talked about this radio station that he was programming down there, and that was in Charleston, I believe. And then wasn't a few months later he was dead. I just couldn't believe it. I was just more. I couldn't imagine John Major being dead. I couldn't.
No, he's one. Yeah, we've talked about it. A lot of these guys too. We lost too soon. Tom Rivers, Terry Steele, John Major, gone too soon. Here's a guy who was around your station briefly, I think, at this time. I just had Jeannie Becker on the show, so we kind of talked about J.D. Roberts being on the new music with her on City TV. But did you know J.D. Roberts?
No, I did not know J.D.
Okay. So no John Roberts Fox News questions for you.
No.
Two more names. One is a guy I learned about because I loved watching American Graffiti as a kid. But what can you tell us about Wolfman Jack?
Well, Wolfman was a very special character, as you might imagine. I knew him as Smitty. I called him Smitty. His manager hated that. He always said, call him Wolf or Wolfie. And I said, screw you. Hey, what's going on, Smitty?
Everything fine. Everything just fine. That's all right. Yeah.
And you get him alone, you'd get a couple of tokes in him. This guy, listen.
Yeah.
He would come down or up, I guess it would be to Toronto. You have a pack of cool cigarettes, right?
Right.
He'd reach in that pack and pull out a joint. Now, I don't know how the hell he got that thing across the border. He must have had a stamp, machine to seal up the package, but he had a cool cigarette package filled with joints. And he would smoke up that radio station. You walk in that door, boom, boy, it would hit you like a rock. One time, my wife and her sister, they would come up to the radio station. We'd give them albums to run up to seniors and get us something to eat, right, and bring it back.
Right.
So there she's his manager, Wolfie's manager, is at the door. And he said, now we want 8 hamburgers. We want 4 orders of fries. We want 3 shakes. And Sandy said, oh, must be you got a lot of people back there. I said, nope, that's just for Wolf. When that guy got the munchies, right. Boy, he really got the munchies,
Well, shout out to Canna Cabana. I love that story. Okay, now here's a guy. I'm going to play a song. So we're only about a couple of weeks away from the Blue Jays home opener here at the Dome here. And thankfully they got their labor dispute figured out. They're playing spring training games now. Everybody's got Blue Jays fever. Here's a song. I'm going to play a bit of it, maybe about a minute, fade it down, and I want to talk to you about this guy and this song. Here we go.
I love the clinchers when they're tied at 2. I love the coaches, the entire crew. I love the Blue Jays. I love the diamond and the bleacher seat. Who's on the schedule? Who can we defeat? I'll buy a hot dog, 'cause I love to eat and watch the Blue Jays. Blue Jays!
Scott, do you remember this song?
No, I don't, but I love it.
Yeah, it's good, right? It's too good to be like, so it's called We Got the Blue Jays, and I understand it was Mike Holland.
Really?
This is my understanding, yeah. And I know Mike Holland's not his real name, like many of you guys, but
I don't remember. Is he supposedly singing it, or did he produce it, or what was?
I think he's singing it, and I think I believe so. And okay, now we're going way back. Before I had a podcast, I had a blog, and I wrote about this song because I've had this I have a collection of like Blue Jay songs, and I've had this song, We Got the Blue Jays, but this one always stuck out to me as being too good to be like a novelty song. Like it sounds like a legit great song. And I wrote about it.
Well produced.
Yeah, very well produced. And I wrote about it. Mike, and then I got an email from, what's his real name? Mike Boulier? Do you know Mike?
I never knew his real name.
Okay. So I think it's Mike Boulier, something to that effect. Living in the States. He goes, I used to be Mike Holland on 1050 CHUM. And this was my song, and I got all these details, and I just wondered if you had any memories of this song or Mike Holland's production or anything, but it sounds like no, but you're digging the jam here.
Yeah, I do, and I had no idea who was a singer. Of course, I'm a singer too, and a drummer. So, Mike, if you're listening to this, let's get together up in Toronto at the next CHUM reunion, and we'll we'll kick out some jams. That's what we'll do. We'll kick out the jams, MF.
Love it. Shout out to MC5. Love it so much. Okay. Love it so much. Now, and if you can maybe we can get Mike Holland on that 1050 CHUM episode. Who knows? But okay. So now I want to find out post CHUM. Why does it end for you at CHUM in the late 1970s?
I wanted to do something with a more adult approach, and I just decided it was time to move on. Also, I wanted to buy a house, and I couldn't do it in Canada. I have GI Bill. I can buy houses, in the United States with the help of the GI Bill. I couldn't use that in Canada.
Gotcha.
So the opportunity presented itself for me to go to Washington, D.C., and Dan Mason called me up, and the first question he had was, Scott, what kind of beer y'all drink up there in Canada? Uh-huh. I said, yep, that's the guy right there. So I came down to D.C. and worked at WPGC, and we were number one. I was anyway. I had a 12 share in D.C., and I was able to take that to mornings in Baltimore, and then later to Los Angeles, New York, all over the place.
And you would fill in for Larry King? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I was Larry's sub for a year, yeah.
That's amazing, too. Just a fun little...
On radio, not on TV.
Right. No suspenders for you, right?
No. Well, Larry didn't have suspenders back in those days. His pants fell down.
See, he
would get there, he'd sit down, his pants would be around his knees, and I said, Larry, you ought to get some suspenders. And eventually he did.
He took your advice, and then it became his trademark, I'd say. All right, you mentioned, is it the Department of, the U.S. Department of Energy? Is that who you got your employee for before you retired?
Yeah, I was a systems admin at the U.S. Department of Energy.
All right, good for you. You're never too late to change careers. And I have a question, though, about your radio life, because 1050, of course, well, at some point it became like oldies. It left top 40 for oldies at some point in the 80s. And then it famously, especially for listeners of this program, because I did a special mockumentary all about it, but it became the Team 1050. Shout out to Jim Van Horn.
Yeah.
So it was a sports experiment that did not last very long. No, if you hear that episode, you hear from like people like Paul Romanuk and Mike Richards, who were not and Jim Van Horn, who were not very happy with how that all ended. They were promised something, it didn't work out. But is it right that you come back voice tracking shows post? Yep. So between the sports things, so tell me, like, how did that come to be?
Brad Jones, Nobby. He was programming CHUM at the time when they went back into the music format, and he'd asked me if I would be willing to do it, and I honestly I didn't see how it would be possible. How do you pull that off? So we kicked that idea around a bit, for a while, and finally we just thought we'd give it a try. So I went out and got a Comrex unit, which actually all that show was done over a standard landline telephone line.
Wow.
And basically in a modem. It uses a modem.
Okay.
Like the old-fashioned ones we used to use to get on the internet.
Sure.
That's what it used. And it had like a 26,000 bit per second feed rate, which was fine for voice, right?
Right.
So I was concerned that we wouldn't be able to get the voice thing down, and it would sound washy, or it might sound phased. It didn't. It sounded fantastic. So I was able to do that from my house. I used PC Anywhere to connect to the station's tracking system. And we were able to do that. I'm proud to say I was very proud of that because I had program directors and general managers contacting me and asking me if they flew me up to Canada every weekend to do that show. And I was sitting in my underwear, my SpongeBob boxer shorts
in Virginia,
in my house doing this thing.
Wow.
It was just fantastic. And I do have a lot of those shows on tape. Well, not on tape, but on audio.
Sure.
I used to, listen to them every week to make sure that everything was right, And I don't think we ever sounded anything other than completely live. It really sounded good.
But that's a little scary, right? Like, because part of what I love about radio is that it's live and local. But you can have a guy in his underwear in Virginia sending it over.
Yeah. Well, I used to do my show in my underwear when I was
right.
at CHUM too. But we don't. Probably should not talk.
Now, Tom Rivers, this is the story I heard. Maybe you know if it's right or not, but Tom Rivers had a similar comeback opportunity via the voice tracking, but I think he had an issue of the fact that he was making less in 2002 than he made in 1972 because of this voice tracking.
They didn't pay squat.
Right. Well, Mark Weisblatt from 1236, shout out to 1236.ca. He shared that little Timbit, and I thought, okay, that sounds about right. But hey, man, you had a good time returning to the airwaves here in Toronto.
I did, and I got a lot of response from that. There's one guy that used to have listening parties at his house. He'd have 80 people in his house listening to me on the air, and Scott, after all those years,
there's times of the day where there's not 80 people listening to 1050 right now.
I know, and it was. I never knew. Let me just put it this way: I never knew back in the 70s how popular we were. I had no clue. I knew we were fairly popular, right? You had to be if you were on that station. But I had no idea in the world that people 40, 50 years later would remember what I did. I hadn't a clue. When I left Toronto, I thought, that's great. That was a lot of fun. Now it's time to do the next thing. And I didn't really think much of it. And then people started contacting me, and I thought, what in the world? It was just the most amazing thing.
When I speak to Torontonians of a certain age, okay, I'll just maybe 60 plus, let's say. I don't know. Maybe
60 plus. That sounds about right. Yeah.
Baby boomers, let's say. If you talk to a Toronto baby boomer, more than likely than not, if you mention 1050 CHUM, they light up like they're a teenager again. It's magic. Yep. It's magic.
Yes, it is magic. And you know what? None of the other radio stations that I'm aware of, at least, have that kind of response. WABC, no way.
Right.
WFIL, no way. KHJ, no way. They don't remember. But in Toronto, they remember CHUM. Here's why. Unlike CFTR, unlike some of these other stations that competed with us, we were bang on 100% micro-focused on being a Toronto radio station. We were Toronto in everything we did. If you look at our CHUM charts, those little music survey packages.
Absolutely.
Those, you will see that every time we took a picture and put it on the front of that, there would be a Toronto landmark in there. City Hall, Center Island, right? All the places that people in Toronto went to. And everything we did on the air, we did focused like a laser on Toronto. We were Toronto's radio station.
Scott, I'm so glad you wrote me after hearing Mike Cooper on Toronto Mic'd, because it let me pounce. And I'm so glad I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed the last, hour, 15 minutes we just talking about your days at CHUM and more. I'm glad you're enjoying retirement, but at some point you'll come back up here for some kind of CHUM reunion, and then maybe you can sneak me in the back door or something, and I can meet you.
No, you let me know, and I will be more than happy to meet you at the front door and walk you in. Because no, seriously,
all right.
those reunions are for all of us. They're not just for the guys and gals that were on the air. They're for the fans as well. And we love the fans. We want to be around the fans.
Love it. And I am very serious. So again, tomorrow morning, I'm dropping episode 1021, which is all about CFNY.
Mm-hmm.
I sincerely want to do a special episode for episode 1050 of Toronto Mic'd. And if you could help me assemble the crew that would meet on Zoom for this recording, and we can record it ahead of time, and then I can piece it together. But if you could help me assemble the 1050 CHUM Avengers or whatever this group, I would be indebted to you, and we can celebrate this great station.
Yeah, okay. I've got some guys in mind. Unfortunately, a lot of the great ones are no longer with us, and it just hurts me to have to say that.
We'll pay tribute to them on this episode. We'll pay tribute to those we have lost, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got a job to do here.
I'll see you probably maybe later on this year. We may actually be able to do a reunion this year. We haven't done it for 2 years now.
And I'll be there.
Okay.
And that brings us to the end of our 1020th show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Patrick/Scott/Boogeyman. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you or follow you anywhere, is there somewhere we could direct them?
Sure. Just go to my Facebook page. I'm on Facebook, and now I'm a musician, so I'm playing jazz and all this other stuff these days. So you can listen to a couple of those videos if you want, and just drop me a message.
And that's Patrick Bergen. Can you spell Bergen just for people?
Yeah, Bergin, not En.
Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery, they're at Great Lakes Beer. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Sticker U is at Sticker U. Ridley Funeral Home is at Ridley FH. Canna Cabana are at Canna Cabana _ and Ryobi, they're on Instagram at Ryobi_Canada. See you all next week.